YouTube, I am excited, and I have pizza, but that's besides the point. We are going to be continuing the series of When Day Breaks by Mr. Illustrated. Now, I know he didn't write it or anything, I'm just saying his coverage of it, right? Because I know some people are going to be like, actually, they got to make it. I'm assuming not. I could be wrong, actually, there. It's besides the point. I want to continue the story, because I actually really like it. Though, I don't know if it's going to make me not hungry, and that's going to ruin my appetite. Because, you know, there's slime monsters. But I want to see where this goes. I'm very interested in seeing where it goes, and seeing how this entire problem either gets solved or all humanity dies. So without further ado, Maddie, when do I sleep? I'm probably gonna do like another 2 hours realistically. So we'll see. We'll see, chat. Alright, let's get right into the series, shall we? We got a lot of binge. We got like 21 parts, yeah, around that. So let's get right into it.
Sponsored by Sellart's Playing Cards. Thanks to Sellart and a successful Kickstarter campaign, here we have the SCP Foundation playing card.
Though I'm not gonna say playing cards with SCP Foundation is actually kind of interesting. All right, if you can hear me chewing my pizza, my bad. All right, my bad. But
good day, everyone, and welcome back to SCP Illustrated, entry log 126.
Yeah, we back.
The time has come for another When Day Breaks, and today I bring you 100 Voices, another entry into the story written by myself and Dr. Sumerian. Be sure to go and check out his channel for more SCP content. Now, in this one, we are taking a step back from SCP places and instead focusing on just one everyday person trying to survive in the When Day Breaks world.
Okay.
Be advised, this video contains extremely graphic violence and blood and gore.
With
that being said, and without further ado, let's begin. The following data release has been authorized by the following council members and administration staff.
Oh shit. Councilmember 1 might have just died. That's actually pretty big. Oh, and the amulet. Oh, Dr. Bright's the one with the amulet with the soul, right? Like it preserves his soul. If his flesh turns, but it doesn't turn objects if the buildings are right, would he technically be unaffected? What, like his body might melt, but he might still be able to control his body in a way, a sense. Or is it gonna just take over that too? A 100 voices, Apollyon. Okay.
It is sometimes thought that darkness is required for the worst evils in the world to occur. Of course, that is untrue. The worst things have all happened in the light. This city was no different. People came here like locusts from the east to live beside the ocean. They lived the rest of their lives there carelessly, but the sun saw it all. The people forgot where they came from, forgot what they'd done to get here. Forgot everything but a life of sin in the California sun.
Oh my god, I was gonna say.
Yet, underground.
Are we doing a Cali joke here? And they were. I should have said it. I could have sounded funny.
Here, buried deep, blood called out for blood. David Jacobs was a history teacher, a husband, and a father 23 days ago. Today, he was a survivor. He'd been walking through the sins of Los Angeles for most of that time. Drainage pipes and sewer lines crisscrossed the City of Angels, big enough in more than a few places for men and women to walk, and run, and hide.
You're gonna need to.
He could only imagine how other people living in big cities had managed to survive when the sun went weird. It was a sudden thing, the end. He'd always imagined some sort of lead-up, news anchors wishing you well and going off air for the last time. There was none of that. One moment everything was fine, and the next the streets ran quick and heavy with melted flesh.
I mean, you probably weren't
David
looking
had
at the news.
encountered 2 survivors since then. Both, oddly enough, had flamethrowers. It didn't take much intelligence to realise that perhaps owning one was a positive factor towards survival. The monsters above had some sort of instinctual fear of flame.
Oh.
In sufficient force, it would scream and try to overcome it. But in isolation, it shrank away, never fleeing too far, always waiting, looking for an opening, waiting for the flames to die down. He'd stolen the one in his hands now from someone who'd stumbled at the wrong time and fell into the warped hands of the monster above.
Oh,
David
shit.
shook that memory out of his mind as he made his way down the tunnels.
At least you got a
He'd become
flamethrower.
accustomed to the slow drip of water from the walls, to the smell, to the constant fear that a crack to the surface might expose him to the sun. Then came a sound he did not recognise at first. It was like a cat mewling in the distance,
Oh.
but distorted. He turned a corner and found himself in an open area. On the ground were remains, blankets and sleeping bags left ripped and upturned, embers still burning in the fire barrel, tools and sticks and weapons left strewn about the floor. Congealed
There's a
blood
toy on the
and
floor.
the unmistakable signs of a badly wounded person being dragged away. His eyes lingered on some children's magazines he had seen before.
Oh, shit.
He stole his eyes away to observe a massive opening in the wall on the far side of the room.
Dip.
Rubble and stone lay strewn about the opening.
That's when you dip.
Sunlight poured in around the edges of the hole.
That's when you dip.
David instinctively took a step back around the corner. Had it gotten him? He wasn't sure, but he thought that the panic was actually probably a good sign.
Just
He didn't feel a need to go to the surface to greet the sun, so he had to imagine he was fine. The mewling noise stopped. David's eyebrow perked up.
Hello?
He offered into the darkness.
Why? Just dip.
Nothing answered back, but a soft shuffling started immediately. David gripped his flamethrower hard and lit the pilot light inside the flame guard. David backed further away from the corner, keeping his weapon trained. It came closer and closer, a soft shuffling. Thump, thump, thump.
You should have never said hello. You
David
should have
knew
just
it was
left.
right around the corner. His jaw tensed and his fingers hovered over the trigger, ready to engulf the monster in flame. Matted hair, dirty skin, and bloodshot eyes appeared slowly
my
from
God.
around the corner. As the full form of the entity made itself known, David was shocked to see a child, a young girl, no older than 8, maybe 10. For a moment, they just stared at each other. David approached the girl. Her bloodshot eyes suddenly glowed a brilliant amber as the flame reflected off of them. She retreated back against the wall.
Oh. Sorry.
He said, before lowering his flamethrower.
It's alright. I'm not going to hurt you.
David said, putting a hesitant hand out to comfort the child.
This might be
What's
an
your name?
anomaly, so
The
let's be
child
careful
said
here.
nothing, but fresh tears began to stream down her cheeks.
That camp. It looks like it was very recently abandoned. Is that where you're from?
The little lady sank to her knees as her eyes welled up with more tears. David swung his head around to look back over the deserted campsite once more. A man smiled as he tucked his daughter into bed with the rest of the children. The small community of 12 survivors had built something of real substance here.
Are we getting the backstory? I feel like we're writing the backstory.
There were only 9 able-bodied adults if the worst came to pass. Still, there was cheer. For days now they'd been able to make small raids on the surface for supplies. Cans and bottles from the nearby grocery store were lined up along the south wall of the camp, enough for weeks of survival if necessary. At the centre of the chamber was a small campfire, as large as they could make it without making the entire chamber fill with smoke. All around the campsite were makeshift tables made of abandoned junk, a table-sized wooden spool here, a hunk of metal with a flat top there. Small things that made it almost feel like home.
I feel like this is
On
definitely
top
going
of
to
the
be
wooden
the
spool there was a
backstory.
chessboard with pieces already
This is
placed.
going to go horribly.
Nearby, just off the floor, were a Monopoly board and a selection of books and magazines for the children. The scene was interesting to the single eye that had pushed itself through one of the nearby pipes.
Oh.
It then slowly poured out of the pipe, little by little before finally dropping down onto the pipes above the group. It slid along the cold metal, looking down on the group around the fire beneath it. The flesh rippled shades of yellow and orange as it slid its way further into the chamber. One man in particular stood out to it. He had a habit of swinging his head back when he laughed. It maneuvered itself just above the man and waited.
It's gonna
Before
fall in
long,
his
another
mouth.
echoing round of laughter filled the campsite, and the flesh made its move. The round of laughter was interrupted by the sound of coughing and spluttering as the man dropped to the floor clutching his throat. Others rushed over to help but backed off quickly as they watched his stomach rapidly expand. His abdomen became momentarily distended before the man's torso exploded.
That's crazy.
The others stood there covered in blood and gore and watched in horror as the crimson body of a flesh creature
Get out
rose
of
up
there.
out of
Run.
their former friend.
Sprint.
From the grating by the children's area, a single tendril snaked out and wrapped itself firmly around the leg of a woman. The whole group froze for a moment, looking down with wide eyes at the woman's leg, before she was pulled off her feet and into the darkness. She shrieked, and a loud cracking noise came from her leg. She grasped at anything that could hold her, but the only thing between her and it was a support column. Her fingernails were ripped from her hand as she clung on in vain. When she reached the grating, more tendrils wrapped around her, pulling her down into the grate. Her scream stopped as the breath was pressed out of her lungs. Then the bottom half of her body began to be pulled through the inch-sized holes into the darkness below. A groan and a creak betrayed the weakness of the metal grating, and it bent in half under the pressure.
Oh, damn.
The remaining adults grabbed torches and weapons and ran towards the grating. At first they meant to save the woman, but the bottom third of her body had already been smashed into paste by the process. Her face was frozen, eyes wide, mouth hanging open. The creaking metal beneath her gave way as she disappeared from view. A new flesh monster under the grate pushed itself back out of the hole and began to skitter across the floor after the men and women. An echoing crash came from behind the group, who all turned to see the wall fall apart. Several colossal conglomerates of flesh fell out of the hole and began flooding the chamber. Cracks and holes began opening up all around.
This doesn't seem like the attitude of the sun one. Is this the flesh that hates? Or would that join it, you know?
Around them as more and more flesh tendrils began finding their way through. The nearest man to a hole was grasped immediately by a flesh tendril at each end. They both wrapped around the man and pulled. Hard. He cried out for help, but the rest of the survivors were already running.
Broken have like a Kit Kat bar.
Both creatures were reluctant to relinquish their prize, and before long a soft, squelching noise was followed by the man tearing
Oh, typo, I already know. We covered an entire video on that. Wait, this is one of them.
in half. Both halves of his body fell to the floor with a thud. The remains were swiftly pulled from view. Another of the men hid in a hole near the outskirts of the camp. There was no light here.
Seemed like attitude from the sun.
He was trying to keep his breathing under control. The slow drip of an open pipe behind him was drowned out almost entirely by the screams of his former companions as they were tracked down one by one. The last scream cut off, and he closed his eyes. A soft patter of something warm started to drip on his head from above. He looked up, and the lifeless eyes of a woman stared down at him, bleeding from the mouth. Suddenly, she was snatched out of view.
Oh, I found
One of the open pipes behind him, about half a foot in width, grew a pair of eyeballs and looked at the man. He felt himself begin to hyperventilate as a cacophony of voices headed his way. He felt something slick and wet tighten around his ankle. As he was violently pulled from his hiding place, he struggled and flailed, but more tendrils ensnared him. Brought back to the chamber, he saw the remains of his former friends now standing as flesh creatures.
Okay, so this was the sun, okay.
The
Damn,
flesh
it's hella
worked
violent.
holes into the tunnel ceiling, and sunbeams were now streaming in.
This is way more violent than the last one.
And cried, but gained no favour. He saw a blinding light, felt the warmth on his skin, and then felt his face slide off his head.
Why is the sun so violent now? Compared to the other ones. This is the more gruesome version of the sun we've ever seen.
David and the girl explored the campsite, pausing for a second by the small colourful sleeping bags.
Were one of these yours?
David asked. She sniffed, but remained silent. David began going through the various cans of food and bottled water. He stumbled in shock as a rat sprinted out of an empty can at his feet and carelessly knocked into one of the makeshift tables. Time slowed to a crawl as he watched a glass bottle wobble and then fall.
Fuck.
The sound of smashing glass filled the entire chamber. David felt his blood turn cold and all the hairs on his neck stand up. The girl turned to look at him as the sound of wet thumping and whispering began to fill their ears.
Run.
At that moment, the campsite erupted in flesh, seeping from the walls out of the pipes, coming up from the floor. The ground shook with the force of the monsters closing in on them. He beckoned at the child, but she didn't move at all, and David made his decision. He ran, alone. His footsteps on the dirty stone floor were rapid and accompanied by the sound of the child behind him. He felt just a slight twinge of relief on top of his fear. The sound of the flesh breaking through the walls was much more distant now, and he stopped for just a moment to regain his breath. The child was upon him almost immediately. They gave each other a knowing look and continued down the tunnel.
I feel like, no, the child wouldn't
Suddenly,
act like
a
this.
thin sliver of flesh appeared in front of them, emerging from the wall on his left and stretching across the tunnel at head level. David ducked underneath it and kept running. The thin piece of flesh grew legs and began to slowly lumber after them.
I feel like he should do some
David
fire.
turned around another corner to find a mass of flesh blocking the way. He stepped forward and slung his flamethrower into position. The flesh screeched and shrank away from the flames. The sewer water at their feet sizzled in the heat, and the way ahead was momentarily clear.
Run.
Still wary, David and the child continued their flight.
I'm worried about the child. What if it's an SCP?
They were nearing David's home at this point. He had to assume it was compromised as well. The flesh was most likely making a full attack on the sewer system, flushing out anyone it could find. It was midday, so escape topside was impossible. He knew of only one place that could provide any sort of safety, and the burning pain in his lungs and sides pushed him towards it. At the end of this hallway was a maintenance closet, big enough for both of them and fairly new. He couldn't recall if it had any cracks in the walls, but it definitely had no open pipes. This was his last fallback, and he'd stocked it with a few days' worth of food and water.
Oh.
If he could just make it to the night, maybe he could blaze a trail to the surface, and maybe some additional cloth protection would help protect him from the moonlight. Maybe. He opened the door, ushered in the child, and closed it.
Why do I feel like he's gonna turn on the light and if the child is a monster?
There was no noise at all. Then, just outside, a slight splash, almost not loud enough to hear. Then another. Then a chorus. David put his hand on the flamethrower trigger and aimed it at the door. The child was as far away from the pilot light flame as she could get in the corner of the room. David looked at the child and put a finger up to his mouth. He made a slight shushing noise, and the child nodded, crying silently.
Oh my god, okay.
The smell in the room was a mix of cleaning chemicals, mouldy wood, sewer water, and the fuel from his weapon. No other light sources beyond his weapon illuminated the surroundings. In the flickering light, liquid flesh began to seep in from the small gap beneath the door.
Fuck.
David gave the trigger a slight tap, and a bit of flame shot towards the bottom of the door. The flesh screeched and disappeared. The light flame continued burning for a dozen or so seconds, and then slowly died. David let himself smile. He turned his head to check on the child who was huddled up crying.
Hey, we're going to be okay.
She remained silent.
Can you even understand what I'm saying?
She turned to look up at him. 100 voices combined into one as she gurgled out,
Yes, David.
It took a moment for David to realise, but it was already too late. A fleshy appendage replaced the child's arm as it whipped the flamethrower from David's hand, while another hit him hard in the chest. Winded and clutching a fractured sternum, David looked up at the child that was now standing over him. From its head to its stomach, the creature split into two halves, revealing a beak filled with teeth.
Damn, I feel like I don't remember them being this violent in the first two parts. They were just aggressive, but they weren't like this smartly violent. Well, never mind. They did break a siege on London and won technically. So
He tried to wheeze out some words of protest, but the flesh cut him off.
David, please, don't fight this.
A distinct female voice spoke. He recognized the voice. It belonged to someone he had known since he was a young man. Alicia! He choked.
ah fuck.
Yes, my love.
Fall back
We're
and grab
all
the
here,
flamethrower.
David. All of us. William is walking again. The sun fixed him. Oh, you should see him now. You can hardly keep him still. And Megan, she gets bigger every day. Wasn't she a little angel the last time you saw her?
Ah, this is so
She
fun.
was just taking her first steps. Even your old dad is up here with them. But the children miss their father. Please, it's time to come home.
Nah, burn it.
As he heard his children's names, he wailed and wept before the flesh. Reminded of the day he lost them. The day he lost them all. Fear, anger, sadness, and finally acceptance. Resigning to his fate, David dropped his head as the beak closed around him.
Come on. Ah.
The flesh didn't speak. It crushed the door from the outside, and the little girl monster walked out, dragging the dead man behind her. He was unceremoniously dropped to the floor before another flesh creature carried him away. Alicia's voice quickly melted into 100 others as the flesh child quickly returned to its previous form. Strands of flesh flattened to create hair, while white opal spheres filled the eye sockets. The low light of the tunnels had proven quite the boon to the flesh. Though few, the unnatural features that did present themselves were always overlooked. It then went back into the tunnels to look for more survivors.
No wonder. I wouldn't have trusted the child from the beginning, but... Like, I'm sorry. In this type of world, if I see a child, I'd be like, I'm not gonna do anything to you. You could leave. Like, go away. I don't want another mouth to feed. I'm sorry. Run that direction. I'll run this direction. You're not coming with me. Like, I'm sorry. Go. Shoo. Alright, if I have to drop kick you away, I'm knocking you out and I'm running. I'm running. I ain't fucking with other people. And you know, this is one of those situations where if he simply just said, "Oh, you're alive. That's nice. Stay in that corner. I'm gonna go over here and run this way and pretend we never saw each other."
And that concludes 100 Voices. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like
sad.
and subscribe if you did. Massive thank you to Lumi and Hydro for helping me with the voices in this video. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you for being so patient. This one took a lot of effort to get done.
Yeah.
The next When Day Breaks will be here in February. The next video for this month will be the SCP summarized at the end of it. And then going into November, we've got some big SCPs coming.
Alright, this is old news technically because this is like what 3 years old. So, all right, it's gonna be. Oh, I might have just peeked the mic. So I just accidentally clapped. All right. This is that was a reaction to SCP-001, one of the ones. When Day Breaks, the voices. That was very. I would say the ending's kind of sad, but I pulled the flamethrower, bro. You had a way out. Burn that, make it run out, open the door, burn, and then try to find your way out. And then die probably, but you know what? Go out fighting. Anyways, that was my reaction. I very much enjoyed it. Thank you very much for showing up. I will see you guys later. Bye bye, YouTube. Bye bye, my lost souls.